IANA time zone support. Source code leap/zoneinfo. The zoneinfo module provides a concrete time zone implementation to support the IANA time zone database as originally specified in PEP 615. By default, zoneinfo uses the system's time zone data if available. If no system time zone data is available, the library will fall back to using the first party TZ data package available on PyPy. Module datetime provides the time and datetime types with which the zone info class is designed to use. Package TZ data first party package maintained by the C Python core developers to supply time zone data via PyPy. Availability not EMS scripton, not WASI. This module does not work or is not available on WebAssembly platforms where WASM32 EM scripton and WASM32 WASI. See WebAssembly platforms for more information. Using ZoneInfo. ZoneInfo is a concrete implementation of the datetime.tz info's abstract base class and is intended to be attached to tzinfo either via the constructor, the datetime.replace method, or datetime.asTimeZone. From ZoneInfo, import ZoneInfo. Let's do it. So let's do it. From ZoneInfo format, ZoneInfo, import ZoneInfo. From datetime, import datetime, comma time delta. Now dt is equal to datetime this tzinfo ZoneInfo American LOS. So dt is equal to datetime 2020 10 31 12. Tzinfo is equal to ZoneInfo America slash Los Angeles. Print dt. If I print and run it and print 2020 10 31 12 0 0 0 0 7 0 minus 70 and dt dot time tz name. Let's print dt dot tz name. So it will print time zone name, that is pdt. Determines constructed in this way are compatible with datetime arithmetic and handle daylight saving time transitions with no further intervention. dt add is equal to dt plus. So here let's do it. Datetime arithmetic add and print dt add. So it should print 1131 11 1. So 2020 11 1. Okay, it has added incremented month as well as date too. Yeah, so and dt dot add tz name, and if we print time zone, so it should be again pdt pst. These time zones also support the fold attribute introduced in PEP 495 during offset transitions, which induce ambiguous times such as a daylight saving time to standard time transition. The offset from before the transition is used when fold is equal to 0, and the offset after the transition is used when fold is equal to 1. For example, dt is equal to this, okay, and print dt. Print dt. It will print the same thing, like, and print dt dot time zone tz name. It will print pdt, right, and then print dt dot replace fold. print dt dot replace fold is equal to 1. So here none. Why none? dt dot replace fold is equal to 1. Hmm? What mistake did I do? pdt -8. Yeah, here it printed -8. Correct. When converting from another time zone, the fold will be set to the correct value. From date time, import time zone Los Angeles is equal to zoneinfo Angeles America slash Los Angeles dt underscore UTC date time 2020 11/1/8 tz info is equal to time zone dot UTC. So date time. So from date time import date time, right, comma zone info. Time zone info dot this, and then print dtc dot s times Los Angeles. It will print like this 1 7 and after the pdt est translation. Okay, dt dot time delta also import time delta dtc plus time delta hours is equal to 1. Okay, print dot s time zone Los Angeles -8. Data sources. The zone info module does not directly provide time zone data and instead pulls time zone information from the system time zone database or the first party PyPy package TZ data if available. Some systems, including notably Windows systems, do not have an IANA database available. And so, for projects targeting cross platform compatibility that require time zone data, it is recommended to declare a dependency on TZ data. If neither system data nor TZ data are available, all calls to zone info will raise zone info not found error. Configure the data sources. When zone info key is called, the constructor first searches the directories specified in the TZ path for a file matching key and on failure looks for a match in the TZ data package. This behavior can be configured in three ways. The default TZ path, when not otherwise specified, can be configured at compile time. TZ path can be configured using an environment variable. At runtime, the search path can be manipulated using the reset TZ path function. Compile time configuration. The default TZ path includes several common deployment locations for the time zone database, except on the Windows, where there are no well-known locations for time zone data. On POSIX systems, downstream distributors and those building Python from source who know where their system time zone data is deployed may change the default time zone path by specifying the compile time option TZ path or more likely the configure flag --with -tz path, which should be a string delimited by os.path separator. On all platforms, the configured value is available as the TZ path key in sysconfig.getConfig var. Environment configuration. when initializing tz path, either at import time or whenever reset tz path is called with no arguments. The tz info module will use the environment variable python tz path if it exists to set the search path. Python tz path. This is an os.path is path separator, separated string containing the time zone search path to use. It must consist of only absolute rather than relative paths. Relative components specified in Python tz path will not be used, but otherwise the behavior when a relative path is specified, implementation defined. C Python will raise invalid tz path warning, but other implementations are free to silently ignore the erroneous component or raise an exception. To set the system to ignore the system data and use the tz data package instead, set python tz path is equal to blank. Runtime configuration. The tz search path can also be configured at runtime using the reset tz path function. This is generally not an advisable operation, though it is not reasonable to use it in test functions that require the use of a specific time zone path or require disabling access to the system time zones. The zoneinfo class class zoneinfo dot zoneinfo key, a concrete datetime.tzinfo subclass that represents an IANA time zone specified by the string key, calls to the primary constructor will always return objects that compare identically. Put another way, barring cache invalidation via zoneinfo.clearCache for all values of key, the following assertions will always be true. A is equal to zone info key, B is equal to zone info key. Assert A is B. Key must be in the form of a relative normalized POSIX path with no up level references. The constructor will raise value error if a non-conforming key is passed. If no file matching key is found, the constructor will raise zone info not found error. The zone info class has two alternate constructors. Class method zone info dot from file f object slash key is equal to none constructs a zone info object from a file like object returning bytes. Example, a file opened in binary mode or an io.bytes io object. Unlike the primary constructor, this always constructs a new object. The key parameter sets the name of the zone for the purposes of str and repr. Objects created via this constructor cannot be pickled. See pickling. Class method zoneinfo.nowCache key, an alternate constructor that bypasses the constructor's cache. It is identical to the primary constructor but returns a new object on each call. This is most likely to be useful for testing or demonstration purposes, but it can also be used to create a system with a different cache invalidation strategy. Objects created via this constructor will also bypass the cache of a deserializing process when unpicked. Caution: using this constructor may change the semantics of your date times in surprising way. Only use it if you know that you need it. The following class methods are also available. Class method zoneinfo.clearCache star only keys is equal to none, a method for invalidating the cache on the zone info class. If no arguments are passed, all caches are invalidated and the next call to the primary constructor for each key will return a new instance. If an iterable of key names is passed to the only underscore keys parameter, only the specified keys will be removed from the cache. Keys passed to only keys but not found in the cache are ignored. Warning: invoking this function may change the semantics of date times using zone info in surprising way. This modifies module state and thus may have wide ranging effects. Only use it if you know that you need to. The class has no one attribute, zoneinfo.key. This is a read-only attribute that returns the value of key passed to the constructor. which should be a lookup key in the IANA time zone database. Example, America slash New York, Europe slash Paris, and Asia slash Tokyo. For zones constructed from file without specifying a key parameter, this will be set to none. Note, although it is a somewhat common practice to expose these to end users, these values are designed to be primary keys for representing the relevant zones and not necessarily user facing elements. Projects like CLDR, the Unicode Common Local Data repository, can be used to get more user friendly strings from these keys. String representations. The string representation returned when calling str on a zoneinfo object defaults to using the zoneinfo.key attribute. See the note on usage in attribute documentation. Zone is equal to zoneinfo Pacific slash Kwajalein str zone Pacific slash Kwajalein. DT is equal to datetime 2024 1 315. TZ info is equal to zone. F dt dot ISO format bracket dt dot tz info 2024 1 t 31500 plus 12 colon 00 Pacific slash Kwajalein. For objects constructed from a file without specifying a key parameter, str falls back to calling a wrapper. Zone Info's wrapper is implementation defined and not necessarily stable between versions, but it is guaranteed not to be valid zone info key. Pickle serialization. Rather than serializing all transition data, zone info objects are serialized by key, and zone info objects constructed from files, even those with a value for key specified, cannot be pickled. The behavior of a zone info file depends on how it was constructed. Zone info key. When constructed with the primary constructor, a zone info object is serialized by key, and when deserialized, the deserializing process uses the primary, and thus it is expected that these are expected to be the same object as other references to the same time of zone. For example, if Europe underscore Berlin underscore PKL is a string containing a pickle constructed from zone info Europe slash Berlin, one would expect the following behavior. A is equal to zone info Europe slash Berlin. B is equal to pickle dot loads Europe Berlin PKL. A is B. True. Let's copy and try. Zone info pickle Europe PKL. Zone info pickle dot loads print A is B. A bytes like object is required, not zone info dot zone info. A. Import pickle dot loads. A byte like object is required, not zone info dot zone. Okay. Bytes. Okay. Let's do the conversion then, and then run it. Cannot convert object to. Okay. Okay. Why is it not working, man? ZoneInfo.no cache key. When constructed from the cache bypassing constructor, the ZoneInfo object is also serialized by key. But when deserialized, the deserializing process uses the cache bypassing constructor. If Europe Berlin BKL underscore NC is a string containing a pickle constructed from ZoneInfo.no cache, this one would expect the following behavior: A is equal to zoneinfo Europe Berlin, B is equal to pickle dot loads Europe Berlin pickle, and C A is P false. Zoneinfo dot from file f object slash key is equal to none. When constructed from a file, the zoneinfo object raises an exception on pickling. If an end user wants to pickle a zoneinfo constructed from a file, it is recommended that they use a wrapper type or a custom serialization function, either serializing by key or storing the contents of the file object and serializing that. This method of serialization requires that the time zone data for the required key be available on both serializing and deserializing side, similar to the way that references to classes and functions are expected to exist in both the serializing and deserializing environments. It also means that no guarantees are made about the consistency of results when unpickling a zone info pickled in an environment with a different version of the time zone data. Function zone info dot available underscore time zones get a set containing all the valid keys for IANA time zones available anywhere on the time zone path. This is recalculated on every call to the function. This function only includes canonical zone names and does not include special zones such as those under the POSIX slash and right slash directories or the POSIX rules zone. Caution: this function may open a large number of files, as the best way to determine if a file on the time zone path is a valid time zone is to read the magic string at the beginning. Note: these values are not designed to be exposed to end users. For user facing elements, applications should use something like CLDR, the Unicode compatible Unicode Common Local Data Repository, to get more user friendly strings. See also the cautionary note on zoneinfo.key. Zoneinfo.reset underscore tz path 2 is equal to none. Sets or resets the time zone search path tz path for the module. When called with no argument, tz path is set to default value. Calling reset underscore tz path will not invalidate the zone info cache, and so calls to the primary zone info constructor will only use the new tz path in the case of a cache miss. The two parameter must be a sequence of strings or os.path like and not a string, all of which must be absolute path. Value error will be raised if something other than an absolute path is passed. Globals zoneinfo.tz path, a read-only sequence representing the time zone search path. When constructing a zone info from a key, the key is joined to each entry in the tz path and the first file found is used. Tz path may contain only absolute paths, never relative paths, regardless of how it is configured. The object that zoneinfo.tz path points to may change in response to a call to reset tz path. So it is recommended to use zoneinfo.tz path rather than importing tz path from zoneinfo or assigning a long-lived variable to zoneinfo.tz path. For more information on configuring the time zone search path, see configuring the data sources. Exceptions and warnings. Exception: zone info. Zone info not found error raised when construction of a zone info object fails because the specified key could not be found on the system. This is a subclass of key error. Exception: zone info dot invalid tz path warning raised when Python tz path contains an invalid component that will be filtered out, such as a relative path. pickle dot loads raising type error. Pickle type error, a bytes like object is required, not str duplicate. So in this case, this question already has answered. Pickle uses a binary protocol, hence only accepts binary file. As documentation shared in the first sentence, the pickle module implements binary protocols for serializing and deserializing. Okay. Cannot convert zone info object to bytes. Utilization for ACN to a zone for ACN. Data and data and data. This error is something else, I think. Simply issue done. Bytes like object is required. Yes, that is correct. Okay. I need to figure out. Thank you for now.